In this video, we're going to be taking a look at making a simple two-player tank game. So I've got a new project in Godot set up, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create 3 folders as usual. One is going to hold all my scenes, one is going to hold all my scripts, and the last folder is going to hold all my assets. Okay, I've got a few assets already prepared for this project, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag them over and I'm going to put them inside of assets right here. These should be available inside the description, or it might be the top comment, so be sure to get them for this project. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create my world for the game. So I'm going to create a 2D scene. I'm going to rename it to world, and I'm going to hit save, and I'm going to put it inside of scenes, and then I'm going to create a new node with Control N, and this one is going to be my player. So I'm going to have 2 players, one for player 1 and one for player 2. So I'm going to create a node with Control A. This one is going to be a character body 2D. So let me rename this to player 1, and let me add sprite 2D. And if I go to inspector, I'm going to go into assets and let me grab the blue tank, and I'm going to put it in here. I'm going to also add a collision shape for my player. So let me go over to shape, let me go and add a rectangle. I'm gonna zoom in a bit, and it might be a bit hard to see, but I'm just going to drag out holding Alt and roughly fit the player. I need to drag it out a bit more on the left, and then I'm going to hit save with Control S and also save this inside of scenes. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my world. I'm going to go to scenes, I'm going to grab my player, and I'm going to put the player somewhere here on the world, and I can hit save, Control S, and then I'm going to run the game, which you can do by either pressing here or you can hit F5. That will also run the game. Okay, so I'm gonna hit F5, and I need to select which scene I'm going to use as my main scene. So I'm gonna hit select current, and as you can see, my player just pops up. We can't do anything with them at the moment, so yeah, let's get the player actually moving. So I'm going to close this, I'm going to go back to player, and then I'm going to hit player, and I'm going to add a script which we're going to use to actually move the player around. I'm going to add a script, and this is going to be an empty template. And instead of scenes, what I'm going to do is, instead of scenes, I'm going to put this one inside of scripts. So you can either type it like that, or you can click on this icon and you can find scripts manually. Okay, so instead of scripts, I'm going to make this script and hit create. Okay, and before we go ahead and set up the script, what we need to do is go to project settings, and instead of the input map, we need to set up some inputs, so our program can know which buttons we're pressing to do what action. Okay, so I'm also going to prefix these ones with P1 for player 1, because I'm going to have another set of actions which are going to be for player 2. So I'm going to have player 1 up, player 1 down, player 1 left, player 1 right, and I'm going to have player 1 shoot. Okay, so for these, I'm just going to use W, S, A for left, D for right, and the spacebar for shoot. Okay, so the way this is going to work is I'm going to use left and right to rotate the player either way, so clockwise or anti-clockwise, and I'm going to use up and down to basically move forward or backwards. Okay, so with that done, I'm going to define a speed for the player. So let me say the speed is equal to 500, and then I'm also going to define rotation speed. So let me actually make this a tiny bit bigger. Okay, I'm going to define a rotation speed. Okay, if my looks like my editor has frozen a bit. Okay, rotation speed, and this one I'm going to put at, let's say, 5. Okay, and then inside of my physics process, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to update the rotation based on if the player presses up or down. Okay, so let me get the rotation direction, var rotation direction, and this is direction, and this is going to be input dot get axis, and it's going to be player 1. We're going to use left for the negative, and we're going to use player 1 right for the positive. Okay, and then we're just going to change the rotation. So the rotation is going to be plus equal, so we're just going to add to the rotation. It's going to be rotation direction, which is either going to be a positive or negative based on if the player is going left or right, is pressing left or right, I mean. And then we're going to multiply this by the rotation speed, and we're also going to multiply this by delta. Okay, so I'm going to hit save, and then I'm going to hit F5 to run our main scene, which is in 2D. It's this world. This is the main scene, right? So wherever we are, if we press F5, it's going to run that scene. So I'm going to run that scene, and then if I press right, if I press D, I mean, I'm rotating clockwise, and if I clockwise, and if I press A, you can see I rotate the other way around. Okay, so that's great. Now let's also handle forward and backwards movement. Okay, so I'm going to close this, and then I'm going to say var direction, and this direction is going to be talking about whether we're going forward or backwards. So this one is going to be, again, input dot get axis, and this one is going to take player 1 down and player 1 up as the negative and positive actions. Okay, so then the velocity of the player is simply going to be direction, right? Direction times, we're also going to get the speed, and because we want to get the direction of the x-axis, what we're going to use is transform dot x. So what this does is this gives us the vector, which is always going to face in the direction that the tank is facing. So if I go over to 2D, I go to the player, right? The vector which is facing this way, so basically this is like the front of the tank, that's going to be transform.x. Okay, so let me go back to script, and yeah, so that's setting the velocity, and the direction is setting it basically positive and negative. And then to actually move it, we're going to use move and slide. So I'm going to hit save. Let me run the game by doing F5. And now if I press up, we're going forward. If I press down, we're going backwards. And I can also rotate, like holding A, holding D, and I can move forward while going like this. I can also go backward. Okay, so that's player movement done. As you can see, we can kind of go off the screen, so we need to add some modes and fix this. But yeah, for now, that is player movement and rotation done. We can quickly add the worlds. So if I go back to world and I go to 2D, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a bunch of worlds. So I'm going to create a node, which is going to be a node 2D. This is just like for organization. I'm going to rename this to worlds, and let me add a static body, so because it's not going to move, a static body, and this also needs a collision shape, right? This doesn't need to look like anything because it's just going to be preventing the player from getting out of the world. So for the shape, it's going to be a rectangle, and I'm going to hold it, and I'm just going to drag it all the way down. As you can see, it's kind of in the world. So to get it out, what I'm going to do is hit W. I'm going to hit W to go into move mode. And while holding shift, I'm just going to put it around here. Okay. I'm pressing Q to go back into a select mode here. Let me drag it down a tiny bit, right? And then I'm going to, let me rename this just to be a bit more clear. This is going to be a wall. And then I'm going to, while clicking on this, I'm going to hit Control D to duplicate it. and I'm going to press W to go into move mode, and while holding shift I'm going to move it to the other side of the game, roughly around here. Okay, so on walls again I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to hit Control A. I'm going to add a static body, rename it to wall, not whack, and then Control A, and I'm going to add a collision shape 2D. Go to shape, make it a rectangle, and I'm going to drag it all the way across. Okay, drag it all the way across, hit W. I'm going to move it, because if I zoom in so you can see properly, I'm going to move it just so it sits just on the world boundary. Okay, it's being a bit difficult. Okay, just around here. Go back here, hit Control D, and then with W and shift on, I'm going to just move it down so I get so you can see this blue line, it's the other boundary of the world. Okay, so just a bit lower. Okay, that seems good enough. I zoom out again, and then I'm going to hit save. And this is the reason I added a node earlier. I can just collapse this, so you know this is not making a mess. So as you can see, yeah, all this is all of this is contained inside of this node here for my walls. So now if I hit save and I run the scene again with Control 5, or I can just go up here. Now you can see that my tank, it collides with the walls and I can't actually leave the game. Okay, so that's great. Basically, we've got some good working walls at the moment. So let me close this, and the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a bullet so my player can actually fire a bullet, right? And then once we've got that, we'll create our second player and make it so that they can shoot each other. Okay, so let's create a new scene. Add the new scene, Control A, hit Control A, or it's just here, right? And the bullet is good. It's just going to be an area 2D. It's not a character body because we're not actually controlling it. Yeah, it's gonna go on some sort of an area 2D. I'm going to rename this, double click it and call it bullet, right? I'm going to add a sprite 2D, and let me drag the bullet. So bullet, I'm going to put it inside texture here. Now this is currently massive, and the way you can tell is if you drag the player onto here, just for reference, right? You can see how big this bullet is in reference to the player. The bullet should be a lot smaller because we don't want this to be coming out of this, right? So what we can do is I can go over to transform, and on the scale I'm going to set it to something much smaller. I've already messed around with this. It's going to be, I'm going to put it at 0.05, right? And now you can see that this size looks okay. It's okay for a bullet of this size to come out of a tank this size. You can make it a bit bigger if you want, but okay. We don't need the player inside of the bullet. This is just to check out the size. So I'm gonna hit this, hit delete and delete player from this bullet scene because we don't need the player there. And let's also add, so Control A, let me also add a collision shape so our bullet can actually collide, and this shape is gonna also be a rectangle, right? And let me just stretch it out a bit here, and let me also while holding Alt, I'm just gonna make it a bit smaller. Okay, stretch it out a bit here. Yeah, and that seems about good enough. Let me hit save and save it as bullet inside of scenes. Seems good, right? And if I put a bullet inside of the world, just for reference, I can put a bullet somewhere like here. Let me hit save and let me play. So F5. As you can see, we got our bullet, but it doesn't move. So yeah, let's add a script to the bullet to actually make it move. So I'm gonna go to bullet. Actually, I can, yeah, let me leave it here for now actually. So I'm gonna go back to bullet, and I'm gonna add the script over here, right? And it's not gonna be in scenes, so I can go here. I can go one path up and put it inside of scripts. So bullet, the bullet script. Okay, so I'm gonna hit create, and I can get rid of these functions. I don't need this. And let me make a speed for the bullet. If you remember, the character speed was around 500. I'm gonna make this slightly faster at 700, right? And inside of my physics process function, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to we're going to update the position of this bullet. So position dot x plus equal, and we're just going to say speed times delta. So position x is going to be updated by it's going to be plus equal speed times delta, and let me hit save. And then now if I run the scene with F5, you can see the bullet, it flies across. Okay, that's great. However, we don't want random bullets. We want the bullets to come out of the tank when we hit shoot. Okay, so if I go back to the world, I'm gonna get rid of this random bullet. I don't need it to be here, so let me delete this. And now we're going to do a bit of work inside of the player. So right now, inside of the player script, so if I go to script over here and make sure you're on the player script, right, we need to add some code that is going to allow the player to actually fire the bullet. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to type if input dot is action just pressed and player one shoot. Well, the shoot was just the space bars we defined. We're going to run a function called shoot, which we haven't made yet, so let's actually go ahead and make this function func shoot. For now, just to make sure this is working, I'm just going to print shoot. Okay, hit save. And now if we run the game and if I press the space bar, right, you can see I get shoot printed. So you know, indeed this function is running when we do press shoot. Instead of just printing something, we want the bullet to actually come out. Okay, so let me close this, and what I'm going to do is I am going to, first of all, one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to 2D and I'm going to add a reference point for where the bullet is going to come out of, because I don't want the bullet to come out of the origin. I want it to come out right around here. I don't know what you call this, but just around here. Okay, so I'm going to add a shooting point. So Control A, and I'm going to add a marker 2D. Okay, so it's kind of hard to see. So if I zoom in a bit, I'm going to hit W while holding Shift and move it across to roughly around here. So you can see the bullet should come around this this point here. Okay, so I'm going to rename this marker just for clarity. I'm going to call it shooting point. Okay, shooting point, and hit save. Now if I go back to script inside of my player, so instead of shooting, what I want to do is I actually want this bullet scene, I want to make an instance of it. I want to have a bullet scene come out whenever the player hits shoot. So let me make a reference of this bullet scene. So I'm going to hold it and drag it up here, and before I drop it, I'm going to hold control, right, and it already makes a variable for me. So in all caps, let me just close this. In all caps, this bullet is this bullet scene. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, instead of just printing shoot, I'm going to have var bullet. This is the instance of the bullet we're going to make, and this is going to be equal to bullet dot instantiate. Okay, and let's also get a reference to the shooting point. So I'm going to hold this, bring it over here, hit control, and I got a reference to my shooting point. So I'm going to make an instance of the bullet, right? I'm going to set the bullet dot global position. So the position of the bullet is going to be equal to the shooting point dot global position, right? And then I'm going to add this. I'm going to add child and add the bullet, but I don't want the bullet to be a child of the player. So what I'm actually going to do is ahead of this, I'm going to get parent, which is going to be the world scene, like this, and then run add child like this. Okay, so let me hit save and let me press play and see what happens. So now when I press space, as you can see, we're firing a bullet, which is great. So if I so you're going to see the issue right now, actually, because you see the bullet is firing. It's always firing and it's going in the same direction because of our code. So we need to address this. But other than that, the bullet is always going to be firing, if you notice, from the shooting point of the tank. Okay, so mission partially solved. So let's close this. Right, let's close this and let's go to our bullet scene. Okay, so now that we're in the script of the bullet, what we're going to do is, instead of just changing the position on the X, I'm going to change the position, And but what we're gonna also multiply this with is the transform.x. So whatever direction the bullet is facing, that's the direction we want to update the position in. Okay, so I'm gonna hit save. So let me press play now. As you can see, it's still working, right? Because the bullet is always facing that way. So what we need to do also is change the rotation of the bullet. So if I go to the player, and now when we instantiate the bullet, we're also going to set the bullet dot rotation, and this is going to be equal to rotation. The rotation is the rotation of the player. Okay, so let me press play. As you can see, now the bullet, it fires in the direction of wherever the player is facing. So that's great. That's great. So let's close this. So now the next thing I'm going to do is create my second player. So I'm going to go over to 2D, and then right where I have player 1, I'm going to hit Control C and then Control V again. Nope. So I'm going to go over to player 1 in my scenes, and then I'm going to hit Control D to duplicate it, and the name of this is going to be player 2. Right, okay. So I'm going to click on player 2 to make sure I've switched to player 2. And we're going to have to make some changes. So first of all, let me go over to player 1. It's called player 1, but we're on the player 2 scene right now. Let me detach the script. Let me rename this to player 2. Let me go over to sprite 2D, and I'm going to drag in the red tank. Okay, and let's adjust the collision shape to make sure it's properly fits the whole player. And if I go on shooting point, you can see it's in the back over here. So I'm gonna hit W while shift and make sure the shooting point is around here. I'm gonna hit save, and then I'm going to add a script to this. So add a script, and then okay, not here. Now I'm gonna hit on play. I'm gonna go on player 2. I'm going to add a script, and then instead of scenes, it's going to be inside of scripts. I'm going to hit create, and then I'm going to go over to player 1. I'm going to Control A to copy everything, Control A to select everything, and then Control C to copy everything, and then go back to player 2. Let me get rid of this, and Control V, and it's going to copy everything over here. Okay. Now, instead of using the same controls for player 1, because if we use the same control, it's going to mean that we press one button and it's going to move both players. I'm going to go back to project settings, input map, and I'm going to copy this all again, but I'm going to do it for player 2. So add new action. So I'm going to have player 2 up, player 2 down, player 2 left, player 2 right, and player 2 shoot. And for these, I'm going to use the up, the up button for this, down for this, left for this, right for this, and for shoot, I'm just going to use enter. Hit OK, and close. And over here, let's replace everything that says player 1 with 2. So 2, okay, that seems to be everything. And let me hit save. And if I go over to 2D, if my computer stops freezing, okay, if I go over to 2D, I'm going to go to the world, and then I'm going to drag over player 2 and put it somewhere around. Let me put it slightly higher. Let me just put it on this. I'm going to drag my player 2 somewhere around here. Okay, I'm going to hit save, and then let me run the scene with F5. Now I can use up, down to move forward. Okay, I think I might have got something in the wrong order. Up is currently going back, but our rotation is working. And the other issue we're going to see is when I fire, it's going backwards. Okay, so I need to add a few negative signs and just fix something here. So let me close this. Let me go to the script, Okay, so the issue is currently if you go on 2D, what you'll realize is because we're facing the opposite way, the positive X direction is actually this way. So a quick fix to this is I'm going to go over to script, and inside of the player 2 script, what I'm going to do is, well, number one, I'm going to set the bullet.speed, right, is just going to be equal to negative bullet.speed, and this is just going to flip the direction of the bullet. And secondly, instead of the velocity, I'm also going to add a negative sign, so it essentially again flips it. So now if I run the game and I press up, I do go forward, right? Because technically the positive X direction is actually this way, but because we flipped it, now it's going this way. Now I can rotate, and if I press enter, the bullet fires, and it fires in the direction that the tank is facing. Okay, so that solves that issue. Okay, so the next thing is right now the bullet, we can fire the bullet, but it doesn't actually do any damage. So let's make something actually happen when the bullet is fired and when it touches a player. So I'm going to go to 2D, I'm going to go to the bullet, and I'm going to go over here to node, and I'm going to add a signal. Okay, it's going to be the body entered signal, and if I hit connect, okay, so now this function is created inside of the bullet script, and this function basically runs whenever the bullet comes into contact with something, so when a body enters the bullet. Okay, so for now what I'm going to do is just hit print, and let's just print hit for now. I can get rid of this. I'm going to hit save and F5, and let's see what happens when we fire a bullet. So I'm going to go close so I don't miss, and hit space, right? And as you can see, we got hit twice. So let me do that again. So it happens, if you watch very closely, it happens once when it hits this player, and then it happens again because we actually have some walls which we can't see. Okay, so let's get rid of this and let's do something. So firstly, what I want to do is the moment the bullet hits something, I want the bullet to be gone. Okay, I don't want it to continue hitting and then just going on forever. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run Q free, and this just deletes the bullet. So I'm going to hit save, and then now if I run the game and I'm going to go close to a player and shoot, you can see the bullet, it just self-destructs. Okay, so that's great. Now secondly, I want to do some damage to the player, so either kill the player completely or take some health away from it, and I'm going to be doing this from the player script. Okay, the player is actually the body right here. So on body entered, this body represents the player or the wall in which it collides with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do body dot, and now I can call any function that exists on the script of the body. So I'm going to run a function called take damage. We haven't made this function yet, so we're going to have to create this, and there is a risk that you're going to hit a body that doesn't have this function. For example, if you hit the wall that doesn't have a take damage function. So just to safeguard against those errors, what we're going to do is use an if statement. So if body dot has method, and the method is going to be called take damage. If it has the method, then make sure we indent this properly. Then so only if the body has this method take damage, then run this method called take damage. So let me hit save, and let me go to player 1, and I need to make this function. So func take damage, and for now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run Q free, so the player will also die and disappear. So I'm going to hit save. Let me copy this, hit Control C, go over to player 2, and right at the bottom what I'm going to do is also I'm going to run Q free, hit save. So again, just to clarify, what we're doing is if the body if we come into contact with the body, first of all the bullet is going to self-destruct, and if the body has the take damage function, which these two bodies have, the player 1, player 2, then it's going to run this function, and all the function is doing is just deleting itself. It's freeing itself from the queue. So now let me run the game. And if I go ahead to the player and if I shoot, you can see the player dies and so does the bullet, which is a bit of an issue, but it's a start. Okay, so let me get rid of this. Now, one way of further developing this is we could have like a health bar and have the health go away, but instead what I'm going to do is have a score counter, which is going to count the score of each player. Every time they kill the player, it's going to increment the score. So what I'm going to do is go over to 2D, I'm going to go over to world, and I'm going to make some text which is going to show the score of each player, and every time the player kills the other player, the score is going to get incremented, and then we can also work on a way to respawn the player somewhere randomly. And then maybe we can do something like where if the score reaches the maximum value, we can show a win screen saying that player 1 or player 2 has won, and then they can restart. Okay, so first of all, just to hold all the score labels, I'm going to make a node, so a node 2D, and I'm going to rename this called scores, and inside of here I'm going to add a label. Okay, and let me rename this label to player 1 score, and if I go over to inspector, I can add to the text. I'm going to say player 1 0, and this is quite small right now, so I'm going to go over to theme overrides, font sizes, and I'm going to change this to let's say 20 which is still pretty small, so let's actually go with something like 32. Okay, that's not too bad. So now I'm going to duplicate this with Control D, and let me rename this to player 2 score, and over here I'm going to say P2. And now while selecting this, I'm going to hit W for move, and while holding shift I'm going to put it somewhere over here, just giving a bit of space so that if this goes into the double digits, it's not going to go out of the screen. Now hit save. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into the scripts. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a script on the world which is going to handle incrementing each score. So I'm going to go over to world, I'm going to add a script, and inside of scripts I'm going to put this one, and instead of calling it world, I'm just going to call this one game manager, and hit create. Okay, I can get rid of this, and I'm going to have two functions. One function is going to be increment player 1 score, and let me just run parse for now, and the other function is going to be increment player 2 score, and hit parse for now. And I'm also going to have two variables which are going to hold the scores for each player. So var player 1 score, which is going to be 0 to start with. So I'm going to paste this and do player 2 score, and it's going to also start at 0. So to increment player 1 score, I'm just going to do player 1 score plus equals 1, and Control C to copy and paste it here, and then I'm going to change this to player 2 score. And we also want this to reflect in our labels. So let me get references to this. I'm gonna hit Control and copy both of them. Not copy, I'm gonna hit Control, select both of them, drag them over here, and while holding Control, I'm gonna drop them. So now I have a reference to both of these. So what I'm going to do is do player 1 score, and remember this is the label, this is the text. Dot text is equal to, and let's say player 1 plus, and let's get the player 1 score. Now this is a string and this is not a string, so we're going to have to convert this value to a string. So we're gonna add a function like this. The string function is going to just convert this to a, it's just going to convert this to a string. So let me copy let me go below here, and the player 2 score.text is going to be P2, and over here make sure this is player 2 score, and hit save. So we have two functions which can be used to increment the score and also to change the labels. Now we need a way to run these functions. So if I go back to, for example, my player 1 script, when we take damage as player 1, we want to increment player 2 score. Okay, so the way we're going to do this is we're going to use get parent, which is going to get the world, right? Because this is player inside of world. And then we can access any function inside of here, and we're going to do increment player 2 score, okay? Because we're in player 1 script, so when player 1 takes damage, we want to increment the score of player 2. So let me hit save. Let me copy this, Control C, and let me go to player 2. And okay, this got indented. Let's get rid of that. And if you've guessed correctly, this one is going to be increment player 1 score, because again, when player 2 takes damage, we want to increase the score of player 1. So now I'm going to run the game. And if I go over and kill, you can see my score gets incremented. Of course, we haven't dealt with the respawning yet, but let me close this game with F8, F5 again. And this time, if I do it from player 2, if I go and shoot player 1, I mean. Okay, so we've got a mistake over here. It's updating player 1 still. Why is that? Okay, the issue is, I believe, if I go to 2D and I go over to player 2, if we go to the shooting point, let's make this a bit farther out. So I'm going to hit W. I'm going to move this across a bit more right now, just to make sure it's out of the player 2, and hit save. Now if I run the game with F5 and shoot, we can see player 2 does increment. Okay, so let's close this. Now the issue right now is the players are not respawning each time they die. So I'm going to go over to the world and go over to script, so in the game manager, and now I want to make two functions. One function to, and now I'm going to make a couple of functions to respawn each player. So I'm going to say func respawn player 1, just pass for now, and func respawn player 2. Okay, and use pass for now. Let me get rid of this. And we're going to need references to each of the player scenes so we can instantiate them and basically respawn them. So again, I'm going to select both of them, bring them up here, and while holding control, I'm going to let go. And now we have a reference to each of the player scenes. And for respawning player 1, I'm going to say var p1 is equal to player1 dot instantiate. And then I'm going to add child. Remember, I don't need to run get parent because this is already inside of the world. And then we're just going to add player 1. Let me get rid of this. Now we need to add the position of the player 1. So I'm going to just paste the line which I actually made earlier, and I'll explain it right now. So let me just indent it properly. So player1.position is equal to vector2, and right here we have the x coordinate, and right here we have the y coordinates. So randf range is going to give you a random number between these two numbers, and these are the boundaries of the world, which I did a bit of measuring earlier. If you're not aware of your screen size, if you measure it, you'll get roughly these numbers. So that might have been a bit confusing. I'm sorry if it was a bit confusing. Just let me know and hopefully I can explain it a bit better in the comments. So now I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it over here. And this is going to be player 2, so replace all the 1s with 2s. And get rid of this and hit save. And again, if I go over to player 1, when I take damage, I'm going to also use get parent dot respawn player 1. Okay, so when I take damage as player 1, I'm going to respawn. And let me copy, go over to player 2, and I'm going to use respawn player 2 when I take damage as player 2. So hit save, and let's go on F5 to run the game, and let me shoot. And as you can see, I respawn in a different position. Okay, and the same thing happens when I also do it as player 2. Oops, if I can actually shoot properly. Yep. Okay, so now not only does our score increment, but we can also respawn. So now finally what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a win screen when a certain score has been reached, and a button to restart the game. So let me close this down. Let me go over to the world. Let me go to 2D, let me go to the world. And what I'm going to do is, right now I'm in move mode. Right now I'm in move mode. I'm going to go to select. Over here, let me close this down. I am going to make a screen which is going to show when the game is over. So Control A, and this is going to be inside of a control node, right? And let me hit F2, and I'm going to say this is the game over screen. Okay, and I'm going to add a color rect, right? And let me drag this to cover the entire screen. I'm going to make this black, and then I'm going to reduce the opacity to somewhere around here. Okay, you can mess around with this and make it nicer, but for now I'm just going to leave it as this. I'm going to add a label, and this is, let me make sure it's inside of the game over screen, and this label is going to be the win text, which I'm going to say is player 1 has won. We're going to update this via the code depending on which player has won. For now I'm just writing player 1. Let me go over to theme overrides, font sizes, and let's make this something big, like maybe 50. And then hitting W to go into move mode, going to shift it to somewhere around the middle, shift a bit lower. Okay, and then I'm also going to add a button. So Control A, add a button, and this button is going to say play again. And let me rename this to restart button. And let me hit W, move it here, move it down. Let me go to theme overrides, font sizes, and let's make this something like 35. Okay, let me move it again a bit here and slightly up, and hit save. Okay, so this is our menu. Not looking too pretty, but it'll do for now. And by default, this menu is going to be hidden. So I'm going to toggle the visibility and have it hidden like this. And only when the game is over, I want to pause the game and I want to activate this game over screen. So what I'm going to do is hit save. While the visibility is toggled to off, I'm going to go over to script. I'm going to go to game manager, and let me get a reference to the game over screen. So here, and hit save. And then what I'm going to do is, inside of the process function, which continuously runs, what I'm going to do is, before I do this, let's define a variable which is going to be the max score. Okay, so var max score, or let's just call it score limit actually. And for now, let me make this a small value. I'm just going to say it's going to be 2. Realistically, you can probably make this like 5 or 10 or whatever you want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if player 1 score is equal to 2, right? Then what I want to do is I'm going to get first of all, I'm going to pause the game so people can't move anymore. So it's going to be get tree dot paused is equal to true. That's the first thing we do, just pause the game. Secondly, what we want to do is we're going to get the game over screen, and dot visible is true to show it. Okay, and then actually I need to also get a reference to the win text, and then I'm going to say winText dot text is equal to, and remember this is only when player 1 has 1, so I'm going to say player 1 has 1, and then I can copy this and paste this. So hit copy, hit copy and paste, and then let's change this to player 2, and let's change the text to player 2. Okay, so now let me hit save and let me press F5 to play the game. So let me kill it once, go over, let me kill it twice, and as you can see, the screen shows and I can no longer move. I'm pressing WS, nothing works. Okay, nothing works, that's actually the issue. Nothing works, this button is also not going to work right now. So the way we're going to deal with this, well, number one, we need a signal that is going to run some code for us when the button is clicked, and we also need a way to run the code, because when the game is paused, none of this works. So first of all, I'm going to go to game over screen. I'm going to go to process over here, and the mode is going to be when paused. Okay, so basically when the game is paused, we can still use these buttons. And then nextly, I'm going to click over here on buttons. I'm going to go to node, and then I'm going to connect the pressed signal. Okay, and then hit connect. And you can see it's made inside of the game manager script, it's made a function on restart button pressed. So this is going to run whenever the restart button is pressed. So first of all, I'm going to get rid of the pause. So get tree dot paused is false. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to restart the game. So let's say reload current scene. So get tree dot reload current scene, and it should restart the game. So let me hit F5. Let me kill it once and kill it twice. And as you can see, player 1 has 1. And if I hit play again, it restarts the game. And this time I can do it from player 2. You can see the scores have reset. And kill it once, kill it twice, and you can see player 2 has 1. And again, we can hit play again. Actually, there is an issue you might realize, just fixing this small issue. You can see that despite our color rect overlay, this player 2 is still showing on top. The reason is, if we go over to remote and see what the actual game tree scene is looking like, you can see that just over the game scene, player 1 appears again because we're respawning, so it's going over the game scene. To fix this, let me just end the game. So F8. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the game over scene. I'm going to go to inspector. I'm going to go to ordering, and the Z index, I'm going to set this to something like 10. Hit save. Now if I hit F5, and if I go and kill this second player, you can see that we're both below because this game over screen has a higher Z index. Okay, and that's all for our game. If you have any questions, if any parts were unclear, please let me know, and hopefully I can help you out. If you found it helpful, leave a like, subscribe, and leave a comment. It's always nice to read them. And yeah, thanks for watching.